Hey guys, we're so excited to be here tonight to be talking about emotional health of students and how we as youth workers can support them and encourage them and even know the right things to say and things to avoid saying. And so leading in us in this awesome discussion is Danae Klock. She is a school guidance counselor and she's been doing this for 12 years.
10.
10 years, but
10
she's got
years.
the wisdom of a 12-year pro. So we're so excited to have her. And I'm going to turn it over to Danae.
Thanks, Chris. So we're going to talk about teens in a pandemic. And I mean, even beyond this, I mean, a lot of these issues were just already started prior to COVID starting, but now it's just exacerbated for students in a lot of different ways. So this is my family. A lot of you know this guy right here. I've been married to him for 13 years. That's David. And we have two very fun kids. So Aubrey is 7 and Daxon is 3. And he is the one that is a spitting image of this guy. So it's good stuff. He's a lot of fun. He's just so energetic. And then we have Josie. She's our pup. She didn't make it into our family pictures this year. So she gets her own little portrait over here. So as Chris said, I have been a school counselor for 10 years. I've worked in schools for 14, I guess 14 years. I don't know, something's not adding up to me. This is my 10th year. Okay, so this is my 10th year as a counselor. I've been working in schools. This is my 14th year as a mental health worker. Before that, working in emotional support. And then I got my school counselor license and have been a school counselor. I've worked in East Stroudsburg. Worked in Susquehanna Township, and now I am in South Middleton, which is in Boiling Springs near Carlisle, Pennsylvania. So I am a wife, a mom, a counselor, a church planner, an entrepreneur, supporter, and I don't say that to toot my own horn. I just say that because I know we're all busy, and so it is good to be with you. And we wear many hats. I'm sure many of you can list more probably hats that you wear as youth workers. And wearing all of those hats can be a challenge at times, but it's important to have the resources under our belts to be able to help the people in our lives. And so I'm excited to be here with you to talk about teens. So we're going to talk about some of the key mental health issues tonight. Just kind of give a brief overview of things teens are struggling with, especially since COVID has started. Warning signs to know what's going on and maybe, to key into what students are struggling with. Practical things that youth workers can do, youth pastors can do to support their students, and then just some resources as well. All right, so I need to somehow make you guys, there we go, perfect, okay. I have to keep moving my picture of you guys around so I can see what's on my screens. So key things that students are struggling, just since the start of COVID, our kids are dealing with a lot. They were dealing with a lot, but now it's even more. With the start of COVID, a lot of people thought, we're all secluded and we're all isolated. It's going to be terrible for everyone, but that's not necessarily the truth. When we started this all actually last year, I noticed that for a lot of our introverted kids, they didn't really struggle. A lot of the pressure and the anxiety was off of them and they were relaxed. So some of the kids that were like high flyers for me at school were like totally calm and happy at home because all of the social pressure was off of them. They didn't have to worry about socializing. They didn't have to worry about speaking in front of other peers in class. It was like a big relief for them to be able to like have some relief from that type of pressure. So the pandemic, when it started, a lot of our introverts and our introverted kids just were actually in a better place and weren't as anxious as they had been prior. It was our extroverts that were really struggling because we were missing out on all of their socialization and the being with other people and the energy that they get from being with other people. Whether that's still true now or not, I don't really know. I think now that it has extended so long and now we're getting back into the winter months and people are going to be staying in and not socializing as much, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more for both introverts and extroverts, because the longer we go without, pure human interaction and connection, the harder it's going to be to overcome some of those things. And so, like, some of the things that our students are struggling with are things that a lot of them have always been struggling with, and increasing amounts. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the big three are for right now are depression, anxiety, and grief. Those are the big three that we're seeing. My school, we do a wellness screening every year. This year, we had to do it for all of our students, K to 12, and I work specifically in a middle school, and always have worked in a middle school. So I am very familiar with middle school. I know high school, but not as much. But we did a wellness screening this year for all of our students, and our numbers for students coming up with rates of depression or anxiety were definitely higher this year than in years past. And it's not when we do like the screening, it's not like we can actually diagnose them with depression or anxiety. It's just indicators of them dealing with symptoms of depression or anxiety. So students are experiencing depression because they're not able to socialize like they have been. Working with youth, I'm sure you see that. I mean, you guys probably weren't able to have youth group like you were used to, or I don't even know if you guys are still able to, depending on where you're at in Pennsylvania, it might be different. So I know that, even with not being able to do things outside of school, whether it's sports or clubs or youth groups and things like that, like those kinds of things, and not being able to do them as normal are aiding and lending to the increase in depression among our teens. Kids are just they're disconnected. They're not together. Togetherness with that human connection, we know is so important because we've been created for each other. And to have that is important. I am a hugger. I miss being able to hug people and just be around them and not have this barrier. I mean, we sit, even if, when we're meeting for church, we sit with our mask on. It doesn't feel the same. There's this barrier that just kind of feels like something is stuck between us, and we can't just really be truly together like we know and love being together. So those kinds of things are leading to depression. Kids are worried. They're anxious about a lot of things because there's a lot of factors that are affected by COVID. There's, the worry about getting sick, the worry about getting others sick, family members. There's a lot of financial stressors. I am sure that you guys can think of families who are struggling right now that may have not been struggling before the pandemic. I know we're in the midst of all of our holiday giving. We do, at my school, we do like a food drive, and we do Thanksgiving baskets, and we do like giving trees or angel trees or however you want to call them. And our numbers are definitely bigger this year than they have been in past. And I work in a pretty affluent school district, middle class, upper middle class. On our socioeconomic divide is one of the biggest diversity factors in the school that I work in. And so we're seeing larger numbers of families in need, and trying to help and support all of them is definitely a task that we're working on right now. But so kids are just anxious. They're anxious a lot about a lot of things. The school year itself is obviously very bizarre and not normal for them. So that lends to some anxiety because they can't do school and interact with their peers the same way they normally do. And so what do their grades look like, and what does getting schoolwork done look like? It's just a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry about just the COVID and how things happen, and grief. Even before COVID started, I always just, even in the mental health field, my focus with grief was always when we lost somebody, when somebody passed away, that we would grieve. But grief happens in a lot of different ways. We grieve the loss of things, not just the loss of people. And so a lot of what people were dealing with, especially when the pandemic started, was grief, the loss of being able to live life normally, to do things you normally do, to be with people, to have your job, to have your normal routine of getting up and leaving the house and going to work and doing all those things and coming home. Like, we were grieving a lot, and our students are still grieving. They're grieving the loss of their social relationships, their ability to come to school normally, their their ability to be together and hang out outside of school. Now, mind you, I know a lot of teens still do hang out outside of school, but some families, depending on what your family's rules are and how strict or how lax you are about being precautious with COVID, I mean, it depends on your level of grief and the things that you've lost. So kids are definitely dealing with a lot of grief. Some other things that I noticed, at least in my school, and working with teens across Cumberland County, it's just a lack of interest, losing interest, which is, I mean, melancholy is really just a mild form of depression, but just not being interested in doing things because either you can't or you haven't done them for so long, you just don't have that interest to do things. The one that I get really worried about is this disconnection from school and family. We do a PAYS survey. It's called a PAYS survey. I honestly can't tell you what PAYS stands for, but it's PAYS, Pennsylvania Advocacy of Youth Survey, maybe something about that. But the survey itself is focused on like drug and alcohol use across Pennsylvania and across teens. And so they do the survey every 2 years. And so kids will take it like when they're in 6th grade, 8th grade, 10th and 12th grade. So there's like every other year cohort that we do this, and it's done every 2 years, just to see like, you know, what are the drug and alcohol use trends among students? What are the protective factors that students are having? What are the rules around students' use of drugs and alcohol and like family establishments and things like that? But one of the things that was very striking in this survey this year, when we got the results, now the survey was done last year, it was done in 2019 prior to COVID even starting, but one of the things that was most striking is that less than 40% of all students in Pennsylvania, now this is taken across the state, less than 40% of students in middle school and high school enjoyed being at school. So they're already disconnected. They already, like the vast majority of students, so more than 50% of students, do not enjoy being at school. And there could be a number of reasons for that. And I know we're talking about teenagers, but for the whole state to feel that way. Now, when we get our data, it's broken down like based on our school. So you see like your numbers, but then they also give you the state average. And like my school's average was right along with the state average. But so they're already disconnected. They already feel disconnected from school, from their family, from their friends. So that was in 2019 before the pandemic. So can you imagine like to 2020, we all know and love how 2020 is and has been. But if they were already feeling disconnected from school in 2019, how much more amplified that is now in 2020, how much more disconnected they feel because school is definitely not the same. They either are working, they're learning remotely, or they're in some sort of hybrid every other day, partial week type schedule. They're not getting to see their friends. They're not being able to socialize. And I know every school is different, but I know that we see it in my school. Like the kids come in, they kind of roll in. There's not like the normal chatter. There's not the normal like excitement. They just kind of roll in. It's quiet. It's weird. They come in, they do their thing in class. And even in my school, because I'm in a middle school, like our kids don't change classes this year. The teachers change. The teachers rotate from class to class. So there's like very little interaction beyond like the 10 kids that are in your class, because only half the school is coming, on a certain day. So you're not even getting to see the other half of the alphabet. Sometimes, depending on like whatever your structure of your school is. So like that disconnection piece is a big red flag for me and a big concern, because I knowing that kids were already feeling disconnected and not enjoying school before COVID, and now where they're at, like this piece is going to affect like depression, anxiety, and grief. And the longer it goes, the more severe and a greater impact that it's going to have on our students. A lack of mental momentum. This is a term, I don't know if my co-counselor coined this on his own, or he found it somewhere and just used it and didn't tell me where he found it, but like a lack of mental momentum. So like a lot of our kids are only going to school like if they're going to school, they're only going to school like 2 days a week. Sometimes it's every other day. Sometimes it's 2 days, like depending on, districts, sort of hybrid, remote, whatever method of education they've got out there. But for students, and even for all of us, like we start our work week on Monday or Sunday. A lot of you guys probably on Sunday, and you gain momentum throughout the week. Like people go to work or go to school and like Mondays are always a drag. Like, oh, it's Monday, you got to pull yourself out of bed, get to work, get to school, those kinds of things. But then by Friday, you picked it up and you're excited about the weekend and like you've got that momentum going. Like you struggled to start the week, but now like every day has been the same. You've done your routine and now you've got your momentum. For our kids and for a lot of people, at least in schools, like you're not getting that mental momentum because maybe you're going to school every other day. Maybe you're going to school on Thursdays and Fridays, and you got to do like remote virtual, some sort of learning on Mondays and Tuesdays. Like there's no gain in that momentum throughout the course of the week. And so like it just creates a struggle for wanting to do anything, for wanting to, goes back to like that lack of interest, like to have the motivation to do anything, that intrinsic motivation, because you're not gaining day to day in your normal schedule. And then another big one is just tiredness. Our teens are very tired. We all know that they don't get enough sleep. And sleep is so important at this time of their life because there's so much happening in their brains. So I am a huge proponent of making sure kids get enough sleep. We talk about it with our kids all the time at school. And so like sleep is so important for them. But they are so tired because they're not getting enough sleep in general. But now if they don't have to go to school every day, on the days that they don't have to go to school, they're probably staying up really late and doing their normal like weekend type thing. And then on the days that they got to go to school, they might be going to bed at their normal time, but their sleep cycles and their sleep schedules are all messed up because they're out of routine. And if they're staying up really late and at one night and getting up at like 12 o'clock to do their school stuff and then maybe taking a nap because they're really tired because they only got a few hours of sleep, and then that messes up the next night, which messes up so our kids are so tired. And I think that comes, you see that in like that lack of interest and disconnection from school because their rhythms, their biological functionings and everything like that, it's off. And then I can't really speak to this because we haven't seen a lot of this, at least in our students, but I can guarantee there's probably an increase in drug and alcohol usage just because kids are bored. Hold on, I got to admit Mark. Can anybody else admit Mark? You got it? Okay.
Yep, he's in. We're good.
Okay, cool. Look, that's too much for me to navigate. But kids are bored because they don't have as much schoolwork as they normally had, or like just especially during the summertime, they didn't have as many things to do. So I know I haven't seen it personally. I haven't had any personal experience with it, and I'm sure at the high school level it is very different than at the middle school level where I'm working. But I know that kids are experimenting more with drugs and alcohol and other risky type behaviors just because they're bored and they need something to do. So they're going to turn to the things that will give them that thrill that they're missing out in their life. So those are like the big factors that I see. But then I also like to point out that a lot of our kids have really good support systems. And with that support, we see resiliency, we see compliance, and we see adjustment. We see resiliency where the kids, we're going to come back from this. We're going to be stronger. We're going to come out of this stronger than what we think we will, or what we can even envision right now, because we just can't see the end of this, crisis. But we're resilient. We have strong support systems, whether it's with family or with youth leaders and youth pastors, with teachers, people have connections. When you have those strong connections, you tend to have more resiliency factors and can bounce back from things better than if you don't have those support systems or those structures. The kids are compliant. I think a lot more compliant than adults sometimes. Like I can only speak for what I see every day, but the kids wear their masks. They follow the rules for the most part. They don't bark at us about it. They aren't defiant about it. Like they're compliant. They're doing the things that they need to do. And I think that's a huge thing. I think coming into the school year, I know that there was lots of talk, like, are the kids even going to wear their mask? Are they going to give us a hard time about it? I don't think a single teacher in my school has had to address any students more than once, other than to pull it back up over their nose, because that's the big thing. It always falls down. It all falls down for all of us, but it's a compliance factor. An adjustment. The kids are adjusting. It's a slow process. It's life now is very different than it was last year at this time. And so we've adjusted And those with stronger support systems will obviously adjust better than those that don't. But with support, there's hope. It's not that there's not hope for those that don't have the strong support systems. It's just a lot easier and a lot more supportive when you do have that support system. It's a lot easier to have those factors. I don't know. You want me to ask questions? Like, is there anybody that have any questions about these types of things before we move on? I can't see everybody.
The one thing that I thought of when you said, like, and I saw this in my mom and in some students, but she was like, she's a real introvert. And so she's like, I feel great. I don't have to do all of the social things that I normally would do. So I know we're talking about the pandemic, but do you think coming out of the pandemic that we're going to have to see a big adjustment and possibly the downfall of the introverts trying to adjust back into the socially anxious situations?
Yeah, that's a great point. Probably. I guess maybe it depends. Like the adjustment back to normal life will probably be a slower process than it was as we rushed into the pandemic, when everything just shut down on us, and everything changed all of a sudden. Whenever the governor shut down the state and everybody was home and nobody was going to school or work or anything like that, and nobody was doing anything social, that was a very rapid change. And so it was a quick turnaround, and very abrupt. But as the pandemic, as they find a vaccine and as life, begins to open up again, and, I think as we saw that restaurants opened up and sports started being able to meet and do things again, like that was a slow process. And so I don't think it'll be as abrupt. Therefore, I don't think it'll be so difficult for the introverts, because it's going to be as you feel ready to, really, because if you're not comfortable with it and still feel very cautious about COVID, like it's not like it's going to go away. It's just that we're going to have those preventative measures to hopefully allow us to return to life as normal, just like the flu vaccine or, those kinds of things. So that's a really good point. I don't know. We'll find out, but that'll be something to keep in mind as we do return back to life as normal, to keep those introverts in our minds and in our circles, to make sure that we're supporting them, especially as they return to school, because a lot of introverts are probably very happy with remote learning or cyber learning or, whatever. So.
Thank you. I never thought of that. So
I didn't think about the other side of it either. So thank you. Anything else?
I'm good at the moment, but
okay.
This is good. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. I ramble a lot too. So if there's like anything you want me to stop at any point, just like holler at me. So, all right. So let me see what this says. All right, so warning signs. So I thought, Chris gave me some topics to talk about. One of those, like, were the warning signs to know. So I included warning signs on the big three, which are depression, anxiety, and suicide. So I have some symptoms, some signs of depression and warning signs here for you guys. I don't know that you necessarily want me to read through all of them, but I can definitely highlight some things. So symptoms of depression. Symptoms of depression can kind of be tricky to differentiate what is depression versus what is teenage attitude. But the big thing to remember is always just the duration, the frequency, and the intensity. So if something is lasting down here, if you see several of these symptoms are present for at least 2 weeks, and it seems like it's kind of pervasive and maybe even intense at times, that's a pretty good sign that maybe that person needs to get some help. And I see that I've like gone very yellow. Oh, now I'm back. Okay, there we go. The lighting, zoom in this lighting, I tell you. So that's the big thing, to look at like the duration, the frequency, the intensity of it. Obviously, we all have bad days sometimes. You have bad days, I have bad days. Kids definitely have bad days. I think sometimes we forget that teenagers and kids have bad days, and we can like expect them to be happy-go-lucky all the time, and they're really not. They're, especially teens, they've got hormones, so they're going to have bad days. So I mean, yeah, teens can be irritable. Teens can be sluggish, and will have funky, wonky sleep patterns. they'll a lot of times likely put themselves down because, it's all about social impressions and your social scene and your profile. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm not sure the word I'm looking for is, but like your
Social media?
yeah, your social media, like your face on social media, like your profile that you put out there, like who you are, your front, we'll put it that way. So signs of depression, unusual sadness or irritability, persistent, not just a bad day, but it's persistent. Even like if they're with their friends and everybody's having a good time, like they're still constantly irritable, not wanting to do things that they once enjoyed, not wanting to play soccer, even though they've played soccer all their lives. All of a sudden, like they're dropping out of soccer, but not just because maybe they're tired of soccer, but because they're sleeping all the time and they have this sense of worthlessness. And so it's not just one of these symptoms, it's more than one of these symptoms to have an indication of depression. Drastic changes in weight, maybe because they're feeling depressed and they're eating all the time, or vice versa, they're not eating because they're just so depressed they don't want to eat. So there's a drastic change in weight. Feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, thoughts of attempts of suicide. And there's some others over here that are a little more like just social withdrawal, more quiet than usual. So with depression, it's any of these symptoms, several of these symptoms, but it has to be lasting for at least 2 weeks. But then like there could be like melancholy. There's different types of depression. There's seasonal affective disorder, which is just as the change of seasons come and winter comes in and it's darker and nobody's going out and doing things and you're not getting as much sunlight, people sometimes will sink into some seasonal depression for the winter months. And then once everything starts opening up and get green and you can be outside easier, they come out of it because of the vitamin D. There's going to be COVID depression because everybody's going to be isolated and not being able to go out and do things with others, because we're not gonna be able to get outdoors as much because of the weather. But then you can't even go out and go shopping, or you can't even go out and eat at a restaurant or pick up a game of whatever, hang out at people's houses. Just so there's gonna be a COVID depression probably this winter in addition to seasonal depression and other, just regular depression too. So I thought this was a really good line here. If you see these, take note, but if they last, take action. So things happen, we might have an issue with something and it leads to some sadness for several weeks. You lose somebody, you just don't feel good. Maybe you feeling sluggish for a couple days, but if it lasts longer than that, then that's a huge indicator of something more going on. Suicide. Suicide is the third leading cause of death in ages 10 to 24. So it is one of the biggest things our kids are dealing with, and a leading cause of death. Most times it is because there's an underlying mental health illness that hasn't been addressed or hasn't been caught yet. So 9 times out of 10, someone who has died by suicide has some sort of underlying mental health illness. One of the most concerning things is that a lot of times between the onset of symptoms of some sort of mental health illness and when a person finally gets treatment because it has gotten so bad, can often span the time of 10 years. So a lot of times people won't get help until it's like a stage 4 type situation. They don't get help when it's more stage 1 or stage 2. And if we know cancer, like you're more likely to survive cancer if you get the treatment that you need in stage 1, stage 2 versus stage 3 and stage 4. The same is true with mental health. Not that everybody's going to die by suicide in regards to that, but like your ability to overcome it and be healed from whatever emotional or mental health stressor you have going on is more likely to happen when you're in a stage 1, stage 2, the symptoms are just starting and you're still able to maybe overcome them pretty easy versus a stage 3 or stage 4 mental health illness. So the longer it goes, the more likely someone is to consider suicide because they're feeling more and more hopeless the longer these symptoms last without treatment, whether that's medical treatment or therapy. And most times, a combination of the two is what's going to bring that person back to health and healing, not just one or the other. So some signs of suicide, things that are going on inside a student where things they might be saying, doing, moods that they might have that are indications that something is going on and they need to talk. Most times, there are times where somebody might die by suicide and there are no indicators. I have heard stories of that. You know, a lot of times there are very few indicators, but most times there are some sort of indicator. Nobody wants to die by suicide. A lot of times it is an impulsive action based on feelings of complete hopelessness and worthlessness. And so there's often cries for help. There are warning signs that this is going on. But we have to be educated about what they are so that we could pick up on them. So, you know, focusing on a student's talk, what are the things that they're saying? Are they feeling like they're a constant burden, like they have no reason to live? They're feeling completely hopeless or trapped. They have some sort of unbearable pain. Maybe they've experienced some sort of trauma that is just haunting them and they can't overcome it. Behaviors, are they withdrawing from activities that they love? Are they withdrawing from people, not wanting to be around anybody? Maybe they've had a sudden use of drugs or alcohol or an increase. They're acting recklessly, sleeping all the time or not sleeping at all, the very far ends of the spectrum, giving away things, you know, bringing things to school or bringing things to youth group or bringing things over to people's houses to say goodbye. And here, I really want you to have this, like prized possessions, things that are really important to them, giving away those kinds of things. And then just feeling mood or anxious, a lot of times, or both. They are often very much hand in hand. Being humiliated, think of those kids that are bullied and they're humiliated in front of their peers, and then go home because they feel completely hopeless and don't feel like anybody loves them or will ever be able to help them. And so impulsively end up taking their own life or trying to because they just feel humiliated and unloved. So those are some of the big signs. There's a lot of different acronyms out there based on different programs to kind of keep in your mind. The one that we use at my school is ACT, acknowledge, care, and tell. Acknowledge with a person that they're feeling something, that there's something going on, something major. Tell them that you care about them, that you want to help them, and then go tell a trusted adult. Like those are the acronyms that we use with our students a lot. But there's QPR, and there's ALGE. So there's a bunch of different ones out there. And there is an act out in Pennsylvania called Act 71 that requires all students in grades 7 through 12 to be educated about suicide. So every school should have some sort of suicide informative program that they've gone through with students and have like shared with them. So sometimes they'll bring people in and sometimes they'll do it on their own. Like we do our own thing with a program called Signs of Suicide, and we educate students on like the different mental health factors and the warning signs and what to do if they have a friend who needs help and who they feel worried about, and like the steps to take, those kinds of things. So that is like a law in Pennsylvania that you have to have some sort of education. And then teachers themselves also have to be educated. At the end, I'll give you some resources as far as like some things that maybe you can do as youth pastors to educate yourself and be trained to be either mental health first aid certified or get a training on some of these preventative programs to kind of know the lingo. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But those are the suicide warning signs. And it's always really tough to talk about because it's such a heavy topic. So I don't want to glaze over it, but I don't want to, you know, spend all our time. But is there anything that you guys have any questions on? I also have anxiety next, but on depression or suicide.
I think it's not a question, but like it just always stinks to just be reminded of the facts and to think about like what they're carrying. And it's just like, man, like it just sometimes it can be so easy to be like, okay, like they're just having, they're being a teenager, but like to realize that this is going on sometimes behind the scene, and like it's just hard. It just stinks. That's the hard part of working with students is just knowing they've got a lot on their hearts and their minds, and we can't always articulate it too. It's just tough, and helping them to navigate through that. And
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like, yeah, being able to articulate what's going on is, definitely difficult for a lot of students. A, because they have either been taught, don't tell anybody about our personal business, or B, they just don't know who to go to. Like, they don't think anybody will understand. And so getting them to be able to open up and articulate is definitely a tough thing to do. So, and that reminds me, just like even, going back to like the things our students are dealing with. I forgot to add onto my list trauma. With COVID, just the state of households, don't know what's really going on, but there's definitely been an uptick in domestic violence. The difficulties families are having as far as financial stressors that they might not have had before, food insecurity, and maybe losing homes, or just not feeling safe. So trauma is a big factor, and learning, all you can, like that's one thing that my goal is to really kind of deep dive into in the next year, is understanding trauma and being trauma informed, and like how to approach trauma, and people who've experienced trauma a lot of times, which we don't know, because again, it goes back to that, like, this is our personal business, don't tell anybody about this kind of thing. But yeah, domestic violence has definitely been uptick since the start of COVID. They said either families will fall apart or grow in any number of ways because of COVID. And I know several students in my own school that are experiencing divorce right now, because I don't know if it was because of COVID, but it happened during COVID. So life changes like that, families arguing, insecurity about safety and things like that, in addition to COVID and the sickness that comes with it. And also, Chris, you had mentioned about like the things to say and not to say. In regards to suicide, nobody commits suicide. The term that you want to always be careful to use is death by suicide or died by suicide, not committed suicide, because it often is an impulsive, spur of the moment, go through with it kind of action. It is died by suicide is the proper term to use, rather than commit suicide. It's a little factor there. All right. Anxiety. Anxiety is a really hard thing to pinpoint, because nobody's anxiety is really the same. A lot of times people think, when they think anxiety, they only think in panic attacks and people hyperventilating. But there's a lot of different types of anxiety. There is, just constant worry. There is anxiety that presents as stomach aches. There's anxiety that presents as difficulty focusing or remembering things, heart palpitations, difficulty sleeping, irritability. Anxiety can present itself in any number of these ways, and doesn't have to be just a panic attack. And so anxiety, it's different. There's kids that I can sit with and they can tell me that there's a repetitive thought going on in their mind and they can't stop thinking about it. And that's the thing that is leading them to have quickness of breath and, leading them into a panic attack of sorts. And then there's kids that like, I'm not thinking anything, but I have this stomach ache, and I can't stop. I can't concentrate on anything right now. I can't sleep. I'm just constantly, but they can't tell me one thing that they're worried about. But it's just like this overarching sense of anxiety. So anxiety is sometimes a hard thing to understand, because it can be shown in so many different ways, but it's still anxiety. It can be avoidance, it can be refusal, it can be worry, it can be difficulty sleeping. I think one of the biggest things I see is avoidance, at least in the middle school level. We see avoidance because they don't know what to expect. or they don't understand something, so they're just going to avoid it. So figure out how to avoid it at all costs. I'm going to go and hide in the bathroom. I'm going to go, I'm not going to come out of my room. Those kinds of things, because they don't know how to deal with it. So anxiety can be pretty ambiguous at times, and masked in a number of different ways. And it's really easy to hide anxiety. And it's really easy to hide depression too. You can put on that good face, hold up the little sign, the little smiley face mask, and try to go on with your day and mask it as much as possible. But managing anxiety, managing depression, there's a lot of good things that you can do. Giving these tips to your kids, find somebody to be your support person. You guys can be that support person for someone with an anxiety. Exercise, set boundaries with your phone. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Set a timer, and instead of just, staying focused on your schoolwork for 7 hours at home, get up and take a walk between every class that you have to Zoom, or, whatever you need to do. Deep breathing, mindfulness. I know mindfulness is a big thing in schools right now. And I don't know how everybody feels about mindfulness. I know some pastors or some church people might think that it's all new age-ish and I don't know, yoga-ish and all kinds of like Buddha and all kinds, but I enjoy it. I enjoy mindfulness. And for me personally, when I'm participating in a mindful activity with my kids at school or with staff or something like that, like my focus isn't just on a blank state of mind. My focus is on prayer and peace in that time of being able to focus and slow down and bring myself to the presence rather than being worried about the 10 things that I can't control right now. And so you can use mindfulness in a very spiritual Christian sense. It doesn't have to be all 100% new age-ish. And so just a little nugget there. I don't know how you all feel about it, but I think it's really good for kids because they're flooded with information. They're flooded with things going on in their world. There's so much that they can't control, especially as teenagers. And so being able to help them learn to slow down and tune into God, tune into their faith and the peace that he gives, and calm their mind and bring them back to the present and help them, remind them like of everything that they have going on, and that let's just focus on the here and now. It's a good thing for kids. So
this might be like a tough question, but I don't know if you saw me smiling on your last slide, because I have a student that describes him to the T. But this whole time we've been thinking it's depression, and I've always known that he struggled with anxiety. And so he just has recently started on meds, depression medicine, and so he's been going to counseling. We've been getting together for a walk once a week, and so he's been taking some things. But is there a way to tell like a good difference between like depression and anxiety? Like I'm sure they could go hand in hand, but I'm wondering, like, I guess I'm just wondering if he's getting the meds for the depression, is that going to help with his anxiety and the anxiousness?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a tough one because it's kind of, sometimes it can be the chicken or the egg, which comes first. Is the depression and the sadness and like the lack of life and motivation and whatever symptoms he might be struggling with leading to anxiety because he's not being able to do the things he would like to do or want to do? Or is it vice versa? Is the anxiety leading to depression, or is it just anxiety? That would have to be a bit of a digging question. And sometimes medicines can be kind of tricky because it depends on who's prescribing it. Sometimes if it's like a family physician, they don't always dig in as deep as maybe a psychiatrist would to know which one it is, to tease it out. Is it depression or is it anxiety? I have a student who was on depression medicine as well, and it really wasn't doing anything for her. And then a couple weeks ago, they finally switched over to an anxiety medication, and it's like she's like almost like a whole new kid. She has a lot more confidence, and like because the anxiety is being suppressed, and instead of a depression that was really just making her more depressed, honestly. And so sometimes it's trial and error, but then sometimes it's really just the working together of like whoever is prescribing medicine and whoever is providing the therapy, and them talking and being able to help tease that out. So does that help answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's good. And yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, thankfully he's got the psychiatrist and a counselor, and they've been working together.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm just like seeing this, I'm just in my own thought, just wondering if it's more anxiety, because he gets headaches, can't focus, exhaustion, stomach ache, kind of stuff. I mean, it definitely has the sluggishness and just apathy for a lot of things. But I was like, man, I didn't really think about the real heavy impact of anxiety. Like I've walked through depression myself, and so I get a lot of that. But the anxiety is always something that like has always kind of baffled me. So I'm like, oh man, like this definitely is a lot uglier than I thought.
Yeah. And a lot of times we're like, well, just get over it. Like just do, or, it's not that big of a deal. But when you're struggling with anxiety, it's difficult. I had a friend who, like, her big thing was like crossing bridges. And so she could not, for the longest time, with other factors, she could not drive over a bridge. She could not get to work. There were days that because she lived on my side of the Susquehanna River, there were days where I had to pick her up from her house to take her to work because she was in such an anxious state. Like she could not bring herself to get in her car and drive to work. And for us, oftentimes anxiety can, if you're not struggling with it, I shouldn't say for us, because I don't know if you guys do. For somebody who doesn't struggle with that kind of anxiety, it's really hard for them to like wrap their minds around like the illogical, unreasonable thing that person is dealing with. Like, just get in your car and drive over the bridge. What's the big deal? Like, it's sturdy. Thousands of people drive over it every day. Like, nothing's happened, but she couldn't. And it's really hard for somebody to really understand the illogical things that are happening in somebody's mind when they're struggling with anxiety, whether it's something specific like a bridge or something more general. It often will seem really illogical and unreasonable to somebody who doesn't understand it and can't understand like why somebody would be struggling with something that seems so simple.
Yeah, that's good. I guess I've always taken anxiety just to be like, I'm anxious about this. Like I don't want to do this. So I guess I feel like I'm like, that corny picture of like the iceberg, like above water and below water. Like I've always seen like the above water, like, okay, like really upset. I don't want to do this. Can't do this. And I'm like, okay, like I've understood that, but never really recognizing all the underlying stuff. And so I think that's awesome to be hearing about it and just like, okay, like to be more sensitive and just supportive and not that I've challenged him or anything mean, but just to, I don't know, just get a different view of that. So thank you.
Yeah. You have to be careful not to enable, because you can quickly enable somebody's anxieties and allow them to completely envelop themselves in their anxiety and not ever work to overcome it. But at the same time, you have to be sensitive to it. Like, it's just a fine line to toe. You have to be sensitive to it, because you can't cause them to completely shut down, or you'll never get them to the point where they'll be able to overcome it. A lot of times with anxiety, especially if it's something specific, like it's desensitization, like little baby steps to get to the point where you can do whatever it is that you are doing. Like, she was working, my friend who struggled to cross a bridge, she was working with a therapist who was doing that exact thing. Like, okay, here's your homework, you're going to try to do this. And then the next week it was, here's your homework, you're going to try to do this, as you work towards being able to overcome that anxiety. And that's easy when it's something very specific like that. But when it's something more general, it takes a lot more teasing and out of being able to figure out what it is that's going to work for that student. So, all right. So what can you as youth pastors do? I have 3 things here. Promote a sense of calmness, promote a sense of connectedness, and promote a sense of hope. So promote a sense of calmness, like be that sounding board for your students right now. They need someone that they know that they can trust, that they can depend on. They need a support beam in their pillars of supports. So be that sounding board, that support beam, that dependable pillar for them. Because like I said earlier, the more support, the greater the support system a student has, the better the protective factors, the resiliency factors, the ability to bounce back whenever, this is all starting to dissipate. I don't want to say be said and done, because I don't think it'll ever be completely said and done, but whenever life gets back to normal, and being able to handle whatever life is throwing at them in the moment, whether it is a quick shift in how they're learning, or their social world is now isolated because they have to quarantine for 24 days because there's a positive case in their home, or whatever the factor is. Be that sounding board for them. The next thing for calmness, just promote and encourage self-care. And I say that first to say lead by example. I'm speaking to pastors here, and I'm guilty as all. But self-care is really important, and being able to encourage that as you're talking with them and meeting with them and having youth group, like talk about the things that they can do to take care of themselves in this time, whether it's making sure that they're living and having healthy habits, hand washing and sleep and all that kind of good stuff. Being active as you're thinking about the things that you are planning and able to plan in such a time as this. What can you do to help them be active? What can you do together? What hobbies could they start? Old hobbies that they could re-up, or new hobbies, learning new things. Encouraging worship and prayer. I know that I've turned to that a number of times myself over the past several months. Just being in a time of worship and turning the music on and turning the TV off, because the TV can be very damaging with all the news and stuff like that that's constantly in our faces. Create a schedule. Like, for students to create a schedule and stick to it is a huge thing. We thrive as humans on schedules. We do best when we are waking up at the same time of the day and doing the same thing around the same time of the day. So creating a schedule is a really important thing for students to do, because they're going to thrive best when they're on a set schedule, rather than when they're waking up at 7 one day and at 12 the next day and 8 the next day and going to bed at all different kinds of times of night. Like, if they can create a schedule and stick to it, overall that will impact their mental health in a much better way, and their physical health. Studies show that both your physical health and your mental health do better when you are on some type of schedule, because your body is in a good biological rhythm. Find a way to serve. I know that most of the students that I work with, whether they're in middle school or high school, thrive when they're able to help others, especially my middle schoolers. I'm sure that dies off a little bit at certain points in their lives, especially my 8th graders. My 6th graders love to help, my 8th graders not so much. But find a way to serve, because when you're helping others, it helps you. It's a cyclical thing. Like, when you're helping somebody, when you're serving when you're on a mission trip, we always say that we're more blessed than what we've blessed those people that we've gone to serve, because we've been touched, and that cycle is very healthy for students to have an experience in a time where they might not feel like they have much control over anything, or feel pretty at a loss of how to help anybody other than cleaning their rooms for the 3rd time in the same week because they don't have anything else to do. And then tech mindfulness. I will talk about this, I think, in next slide too, but like, obviously we know that our teenagers are attached to their phones. It is part of their hand. It is like completely attached here, and it doesn't ever leave. But talking to them about tech mindfulness, like, if you're picking up your phone, like, think about why you're doing it and what you hope to get out of it, and then not just be like that mindless scrolling of whatever, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all those things that they do. So like, think about the device tech mindfulness. So those are all like self-care tips. So this is a link here. There's links all through this thing, but that'll take you to a place where you can a website that has like a bunch of other self-care tips on it too. So So promote a sense of calmness, be that sounding board, be that pillar, encourage self-care, both lead by example and help them too. And promote a sense of connectedness. When you are talking with your youth, really active listening. Do you guys have, like, when you're doing your youth ministry degrees, like, do you have like some sort of like intro to counseling, or I'm sure many of you have your advanced degrees too, like some sort of counseling type class or like intro or something?
I did. I had to go through child development classes as well as normal like psychotherapy counseling classes.
Cool. So go back, Josh.
I did not. I had an intro to counseling class in seminary, but hearing what Mandy just said there, having some of those, especially child development and all that, I didn't have that. So having information on this end is definitely helpful because it's not necessarily in my wheelhouse.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so just that connectedness, so like actively listening. So like counseling 101 is all about like active listening and reflective talk. So when you're actively listening, you're really taking in what they're saying, you're nodding, you're acknowledging, you're following, you're tracking with them. And then reflective talk is just being able to like repeat back to them what they say, and that encourages them to keep talking more because they feel heard. So when you're talking with them, like keep your questions open-ended, and keep them more targeted. So I think we could all like ask a kid how they're doing and say, how are you doing? And they're like, fine, or I'm okay, or like give that really generic answer, like I'm fine, everything's fine, and there's like a fire burning them behind them, like the world's on fire, but I'm okay. We all do that. So when you're talking to them, like think about like what are some more targeted open-ended questions you can ask them. So how are you handling your hybrid learning schedule this year? Like how's it going for you? Or how's your family dealing with the pandemic versus just how are you doing? So being more targeted, and then as they're sharing with you, just reflect it back to them, and that allows them to feel heard. And a lot of times because they feel heard, they'll then start to open up some more. I will see, there was over the summer, there was a counselor who had written a book on motivational interviewing, and it just gives some really good tips on just that reflective listening and reflective talk piece. I'll see if it's still free, and if it is, I will pass it along to you all, because it can be just a really great way to get kids to open up. Because a lot of times, like if we just focus on like asking them questions after they've said something. So like, how are you doing? Well, I'm doing okay. Did you have a good day at school? Well, yeah, like we start asking questions, and all it turns into is like this interrogation for students, and it quickly starts to shut them down and they don't want to talk. But when you reflect what they're saying, it helps them to feel heard. And when they feel heard, then they feel like, okay, well, maybe I could open up about this. And then like you peel the onion back, and there's another layer, and slowly over time, like they'll start to feel like they can open up more with you rather than just answering a bunch of questions that you have about how things are going or what's going on, or, you know, what they did over the summer or those kinds of things. Any questions about that? It's kind of like very nutshell-ish, but I think you'll find that like if the more you do more reflection rather than just asking them question after question, like you'll get more out of them. Chris, do you want to say something?
I was gonna say that's a great reminder. I just laugh because I'm so guilty of doing that. And then I catch myself. I'm like, okay, I've got to stop asking questions and talk about something else. And so just a good reminder to how to break that up. And I can definitely see it in students when they start shutting down. I'm like, okay, I need to shut up. And and it's like care. I just sometimes they're too not open-ended. It's just a easy answer, and it just leads me to ask more and more questions. And I'm a curious person, so
yeah,
it's not good. So I appreciate that reminder.
Yeah. And if a student's a talker, it's no big deal. They're just going to keep talking and they'll answer all your questions. But if a student is more like, if they're in a bad mood or they are struggling with something, they're less likely to continue to open up because they're just not going to answer your questions. Mandy?
Not necessarily a question, but I was going to say, even I've taken some of the intro courses and I've been told all of this. It's such a good reminder. And we work with a lot of people who didn't go to school for youth ministry. We work with a lot of volunteers and people who are called into the ministry, but not necessarily educated for it. So I think this will be really helpful for those who listen later.
Yeah, cool. No, I mean, I need the reminder too. Even I get stuck into like, you know, all the many hats that I wear and forget to like actually sometimes put on my counseling hat. And like when a kid comes into my office, like actually use the skills that I was taught to use instead of just trying to solve the problem. That's my problem. I'm a problem solver. I want to help and I want to solve your problem for you as a helper of a society. So I get stuck in that, like asking questions and how can I solve your problem for you rather than teaching you how to solve it yourself kind of thing. So yeah, guilty as charged. Another way to just connectedness, and I'm sure I would love to hear your ideas, but like offering those safe COVID social opportunities. Obviously, with the winter months coming, like our kids are going to be really struggling with isolation and not being able to go out and do the things that they would normally do on a Friday night and hang out with friends. I mean, granted, I know some will defy all the precautionary modes, but then a lot of them won't, and they won't even have the opportunity because either restaurants are, you know, limiting their seating or malls are closing down early or, you know, like, so they're going to be a little bit stuck. So have you guys come up with some creative COVID safe things to do with your youth groups?
We're in a little bit of a unique situation, but the church that I work at, we just bought a building. It used to be a grocery store. It's going to be a community center. But right now it's just a really big open room with walls and a roof. So the most successful thing that I've done with the kids so far is just gone up and played dodgeball, and there's so much space to do it. So we're gonna continue to use that building to do different things and use the distance. They just got the heater to work. So I'm excited.
Oh, nice. That's good.
About that.
Yeah, we haven't done anything like different in that, or amazingly different or unique or anything, but I've found just that sense of connectedness of just having youth group. They're spread out around the room. They're not exactly able to communicate in the same way, but just having the ability to gather together. I mean, with the masks and everything, I was real convinced that I wasn't going to be connected to them. They weren't going to be connected to me or to each other. And yet I think I'm seeing the fact that this is an opportunity that they get to be together. And so they're actually, you had used the word earlier, compliance, like they're compliant with it, because I think they realize that this is something that they really need. And so just simply gathering together, I don't think I realized that it was as important, and maybe it wasn't as important to them until it was stripped away from them, and then it became clear that there was an importance to it. But for us, it's just simply being able to gather has been a huge thing, and that safe opportunity for them to be with other teenagers.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really stuck out to me from the summer is just the importance of making everything interactive and hands-on. So like even, Bible studies and lessons, it's not just, okay, listen to me talk and then go to a small group like after 20 minutes or whatever, but to be like, hey, this whole thing, we're going to interact and discuss the whole way. I've taken a page out of Mark Masurgeon Smith's book with the way that he preaches, and just kind of like, an interactive message the whole time, and just getting them to act out and to be present and totally engaging in it instead of just kind of sitting back being participator or observer like they're so used to doing on Zoom. So I think that's been huge. And just seeing, I've doing a lot of children's ministry in addition to youth, and like especially the younger kids, they're like eating it up because they're just like so happy to be together and to be able to engage. It's been awesome.
Yeah, no, we saw that in schools too. Like kids were like really excited to come back to school because they missed it. They realized like how much of a role it plays in their lives and their ability to be social. And our teenagers, like their world is social. It is all about being social. And so like to have that stripped away from them, like you said, was really difficult, and to be able to get it back, like they really value it. So yeah, so just providing those COVID safe social opportunities, whether it's through youth group or, you know, whatever, as winter comes and like the cases continue to rise, or, you know, whatever, if there's things you can do virtually, do it. I mean, I know our kids are probably tired of being on Zoom. We're all tired of being on Zoom, but at the same time, it does provide at least some of those social interactions.
But one idea that to add into what you're talking about there, one of the ways we had a great connection back in the spring, we haven't been doing it now because we've been in person for the most part. I found that we did a Zoom connection that was outside of a youth group or anything. It was unplanned. It literally was it was sort of like their recess or their homeroom. I'm not coming up with the right analogy, but it was just the ability for them to gather on Zoom and to talk to each other. And for some of a good chunk of my teens don't have social media or anything like that, so they're not texting their friends or anything that way. They were able to actually communicate with each other. And so one of the ideas that have kept in the back of my mind, if we have to go to all virtual again, is just giving them an outlet to be able to, no questions, no structure, just let them be teenagers with each other in a digital form. I found to be incredibly helpful to them in the spring.
Yeah, just the chance to talk and be together for sure. Other things I thought of were just like, you know, a worship jam session. I don't know if you guys have that ability. Come up with a service project to work on together, but separately, or even together in youth group. Like, again, going back to that sense of self and calmness, like being able to do something to help others and help the greater good. Like, what is something that you guys can do, whether it's like giving them supplies and working on something at home, or coming together and working on it, some sort of like service project to help, since at this time it sounds like mission trips are kind of still on hold for the foreseeable future. What are some other type of service projects, other things that you can do to get the kids connected and feeling like they have a greater sense of self? Playing board games on Zoom. I haven't done it yet, but I know there is a online version of Categories, which if we are virtual for any length of time, I am really hoping to explore with my students because I love that game. But yes, there is a virtual version of Categories that you can play like on Zoom, which is pretty cool. And like just like the movies, the discussions, just being able to be together, like you said, like providing that opportunity if we, you know, aren't able to meet, still giving them, those kids, the chance to be connected with each other and with you. So yeah, great ideas though. And then understand the power of phones and social media. This is a huge thing. It's also a catch-22 because in one way, like their phones and like social media is one of the ways to connect with them. Now, Josh, I know you said that most of them, you know, don't have social media, but as the students get older, and spend more and more time on their phones and social media, it just I understand that power that it has on our students. And the isolation from COVID is compounding the isolating effects of phones and social media. So there's a huge link between the recent, I would say the past like 5 to 10 years, 10 years probably. So the increase in depression and suicide ideation rates is a lot of times directly linked back to the increase in phone and social media usage for teens. Because that's when, about 10 years ago, is when like it started kind of blowing up and everybody had a phone, and kids younger and younger and younger kept getting their phones. And then we're using, having social media and using those accounts and not really understanding them and not using them for good and not realizing the impact that it can have on somebody's life. So just understanding that and the power that it has over our teens and their emotional health and their rates of depression. A lot of times it gives our teens that false sense of being connected. They think they're connected. They think they know and understand each other, when really they're just more isolated than they've ever been before, because they can like text and talk a lot, but then you put them in a room together and like it goes silent because they can't continue that interaction that they do have through their phones. And the constant, I don't know if any of you have watched the documentary, what is it, the social, what is that movie?
Social Experiment
Is it The Social Experiments? It's Social Dilemma.
or Dilemma? Yeah, I guess
I
that's
think
what
it's
it
The
is.
Social Dilemma. And just the way that our minds work when we are, on Facebook or Instagram, and you're getting those likes and you're checking back to see if who has liked it and who has commented. And I'm friends with my niece on Instagram. And just like when she's 17, she's a senior, but it's just really fascinating to see, like, if she posts a picture of herself, like all the comments that come, like, oh, you're so beautiful, and like the way that feeds our teenagers and feeds their brains and feeds their need for attention and wanting to be liked. But then on the flip side, if you post something and you don't get that, how detrimental like that is to our teens, because they're looking for that. They're looking for that self-worth. They're looking for that affirmation, because it's not the right places to look for it, but it's where they're getting it, because that's where they're getting connected to people. That's where they're getting connected to each other. And so then they're constantly comparing themselves to each other. And it is a vicious cycle. And so the more you can be humanly connected, or connected in ways that is not necessarily directly linked to social media, I highly, highly encourage it, because it has had a huge effect on our teens today, the way they use social media and are thriving on getting all of the likes and the comments, and comparing themselves to this person and that person in our perfect Facebook lives or perfect Instagram lives. So just be aware of that. And if you haven't watched that documentary, I highly encourage you to watch it. So and then promote a sense of hope. I think this comes somewhat naturally as youth pastors and believers, that we use our faith to promote hope and realize that this is not the end all be all, that this is our temporary life, and that we have a greater purpose, and a greater life and future to look forward to in Christ. And so just using that as a way to promote hope for students, this togetherness, resiliency, all of those things will come together. And I know that the future can look really dim sometimes when you can't see more than 2 days to your future, because you don't know if you're going to be in school or not in school kind of thing. So the future can look really bleak. So just promoting that sense of hope for kids, and that we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together, that you are there as their pillar of solitude and strength and dependability for them. Because we can just really get stuck in our negative thinking sometimes. That there's, kids that are struggling with depression, anxiety, grief, they can really get stuck in some of those negative thinking patterns, the all or nothing thinking. Everything is always this way. I'll never have enough friends. I'll always be stuck at home learning. I'll never get back to school. I call that sinking thinking, where it just kind of spirals downward. So challenge those negative thoughts, and this link will take you to some of what those negative thinking patterns are, for teenagers, for humans in general, and how we can challenge them effectively, not just putting them down or trying to put them out with an extinguisher, but just how to delicately challenge some of those negative thinkings, and getting kids to think a little bit differently about situations, rather than just all or nothing and the world is terrible and it's going to end. So giving them that sense of hope. The secret ingredient's always love, guys. You know that, right? It's all about love. Just love the kids. My gosh, there's so many kids that are just going through so many things that we can't even imagine or fathom. Like, I was delivering food today for families for Thanksgiving, and just, it's hard to even imagine some of the living conditions that these kids are living in, and how they can even be doing Zoom when they have 3 siblings all doing Zoom in a room the size of, the bathrooms at our church. It's crazy, so it's sometimes it's hard to imagine what's going on for students and how they're really struggling and all that they're dealing with, but just love them. And I know you guys do. All right. And so resources. So here's my recommendation, is to definitely know your local mental health crisis centers. So every Every county has like a county crisis type line, no matter where you're at. And a lot of times they have crisis workers at the hospitals working in the emergency department. So every county should have like a crisis line, or at least even like maybe in sometimes in a tri-county area or something like that. So figure out where your mental health crisis is for your county and where you're living or where you're working, where your youth are, so that you can kind of have those numbers at hand. I have done this before, like you can call if you're worried about a student, or, you know, if they're worried about a friend or something like that, like you can call the crisis center, tell them what's going on, and they will call that student and have a discussion with them and do kind of like either an intervention or a wellness check. If it's like if it's like late at night, or if you're not worried, or they're worried about a friend and you're not really sure who it is, the state police will go out and they'll do wellness checks on students and make sure, or on anybody really, make sure things are going okay. So know your local mental health crisis center. Safe to Say Something PA, is anybody familiar with that? So Safe to Say Something is an initiative out of the Sandy Hook tragedy and Sandy Hook Promise. So back when all of that happened, those families that were involved in the Sandy Hook tragedy up in Connecticut created this organization called Safe to Say, and they have worked to get this in every state across America. And it is an anonymous tip system for students. So it is, I don't know if I can click on it or not. See if it'll take us there. Is it showing you my screen changing? Cool.
Yeah, we can see it.
Awesome. So it is an anonymous tip system for students to be able to report things that are going on. And it can be for anything from bullying to graffiti to trafficking to abuse to depression, suicide, you name it, the list is there. And it's like, I can't even see my hands because it's like that long. So there's like a list of things. So it is an anonymous. So students can go on this website. There's an app, and there is a phone number that you can call. So 3 ways to submit a tip. And anybody can submit a tip. It just doesn't have to be students. But you can say what's going on, and it keeps you anonymous. And this tip goes to somebody. It goes to the DA's office at the state level. And then they then decide where it goes. So if it's like a bullying situation, it might go to the school and the school handles it. If it is a safety concern, it would go to the state police right away. And the state police will go out and do a wellness check or make sure that things are going on. If it is a threat to the school, like that was the big like overarching theme to this. And then it is, you know, evolved from there. But like if there's a threat to a school, or like somebody's going to go and do something at a school that's, you know, like a shooting or whatever, and you know about it, you can tip off on it. It has like actually prevented school shootings from happening, even in Pennsylvania. So like you type in the school that this person is associated with. If I'm concerned about Jimmy, I would type in the school that he goes to and tell like what's going on, the who, what, where, when, and why. And then there's like this list, like I said, dating violence, hate crimes, human trafficking, everything is here that you could ever think of that would go wrong in a person's life. You can give them the details, then you tell them who the person is that you're concerned about, as much information as possible. If there was a vehicle involved, or if you have a picture, like you have a screenshot of a conversation, you could like upload the screenshot of something going on, and then you submit it. And it goes right to a 24-hour monitoring system where like there's somebody there that's always monitoring these situations. And then like they said, they'll decide like what they need to do. Sometimes they'll call the school right away. You have people that are always on call. And like if they need more information, like, so Jimmy so-and-so goes to your school, but I don't have a phone number or an address. Can you give that to me? And yes, we can provide that because it's an emergency safety situation. And then I've had students submit a tip, and then we get like messages and things like that, go back and forth to figure out what's going on. And if they need, like, if we need to send out like a wellness check, like they'll do that, and the state police will go out to the home and they'll knock on the door and say, hey, we're concerned about so-and-so, what's going on? And they'll have conversations, and then they'll report back in. So this is a really cool thing. And I believe like it kind of goes along with like Act 71, like the suicide prevention training for students. students were supposed across Pennsylvania. Now I can't guarantee that every school has, but like students were supposed to inform students about this. Schools were supposed to inform students about this and teach them how to use the system and what it's for. And you're like, well, what if somebody wants to just get somebody in trouble? Like, and they have like parameters, like if you're bound to like have submitted a false claim against somebody just to try to get them in trouble or try to make something happen, like you get fined and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really good system for students to use because it does keep you anonymous. And if you submit a tip and like it goes to the DA's office, then they can contact that person, and they're known as tipster, and like have a conversation if they want to get more information about any type of situation. Like, can you tell me more about something? Like if if their submission was like kind of vague, like you can like almost text back and forth with the person at the DA's office to get if they need more information. So really good thing to know, especially like if we have a student that's really concerned about somebody else and they don't want to like be the tattletale or the snitch on whatever's going on, they can do this and it's completely anonymous. And they can, maybe save somebody's life as a result of it. So now I need to figure out how to get back to my, cool. All right. I know, right? So that, again, that's just a really great resource for kids if there's something going on that needs attention. The next thing I have on here is call your local school counselor. If you work with, if a lot of your students maybe go to one particular school or in a certain school district, call them up and just say like, hey, I am really interested in knowing like, what's the lingo that you use, maybe with like the suicide prevention, like, are you an ACT? Are you a QPR? Like, what's the lingo that you use? What are some major concerns that you're seeing? How can I support students? It's a great resource to know what's going on in your specific area. Because I know like I got all of Pennsylvania represented here. So other things, this is a website, Minding Your Mind. There's a ton of really great resources on this website for you. They also provide a lot of great training. They're located mostly in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and maybe like the northeastern states, but their resources here are really awesome. They do a lot of great trainings that are reasonably priced. If you're looking for something that is maybe specific to parents, schools use this. This is mostly for schools, but like I said, the resources link here is really good. And you can get some more information, but I highly recommend this organization. I know they've been in a couple schools around my area. They use the QPR lingo. They haven't been to my school, but I know they've been to a number of schools, and everybody that I know that uses them really likes it. So if you ever hear of them coming to a school near you, a lot of times they'll do sessions for students, like assemblies during the day, but then at night they'll also do an assembly for parents. And it's something that you could go to, even if you're not a parent of a student, you could still go to it because they're free and they're open to the public usually. If you just have to know that they're happening, kind of thing. But it'd be something like as a resource to be able to go and see and be informed and get some of the training that maybe parent would benefit you as a youth pastor and or a parent. So I highly recommend that organization and that website. All right, do it again. Coping in hard times fact sheet. That was just something I found that was really good about some coping skills and like things that teens can do to cope with these times that we're in right now. And then mental health first aid is another training that you can do. And I just saw that they're getting ready to do some virtual trainings to be a mental health first aid responder, kind of like knowing like how to help in a situation where you are worried about somebody, knowing the signs and symptoms, being trained on those, being trained on some other mental health disorders as well. But it looks like, as I said, they're getting ready to do some more virtual type responses. So if it's something you're really interested in being educated about, this is a great avenue to kind of have that introductory kind of mental health course. It's usually like a 3-day training, but it does give you a lot of good information and resources and being knowledgeable about the things that teenagers are struggling with. So that's another resource. And then these down here are just the hotlines. This is a relatively new hotline. It's a text line because we all know that kids can text a lot better than they can talk sometimes. So in addition to like the suicide prevention line, there's also the crisis text line where you can text and talk with somebody who is trained to help handle any situation that teens could be facing today. So, and I talked for a really long time, and I'm sorry if I went longer than you ever anticipated I would go.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's cool to hear about the mental health first aid. That's sweet. I'm excited to look into that more.
Yeah, they give you a great resource booklet that has like a bunch of different mental health disorders, and their acronym is ALGE for suicide prevention, and knowing like the steps to take if somebody's struggling with that. So any other questions? Mandy, I know you said you had a list of questions for me, so.
I won't keep you all night.
That's okay.
But I did have like two in particular. You're not the first person that has mentioned mindfulness and meditation apps. So I wondered if you had like something that you really liked and a recommendation, or.
I see here. I know the Calm app is really good, but it does cost something. It's like a subscription thing. So that one's not free necessarily. There's one that's called Insight Timer, and it has a lot of guided meditations. I've used it a little bit, but there's different, they have like a kids focus too. Like it's not just for adults, but they have some that are geared toward teens and kids. For like your middle schoolers, Go Noodle is a website that a lot of like my kids use it, but they also have some like mindfulness, like guided meditation type videos. What's the other one that my daughter uses? That's more yoga though. But there's a ton on like YouTube and things like that. But the two that I have on my phone are the Calm app and the Insight Timer. And I'll sometimes pull them up for kids. You know, if they're struggling with anxiety, I've pulled them up for kids in my office before to kind of just help calm the brain and reset their mind. So.
And the other thing I've been thinking about, we talked a lot about how do you help a kid with anxiety or thinking about suicide, but do you have any advice for talking to or dealing with the kids whose friend just died by suicide, or is really anxious and struggling at home? Because that's a lot of what our group has been struggling with.
I would say just giving them the space to talk and to be. A lot of times kids often feel like they can't let down their guard and let their feelings show. And so giving them the space that allows them to do that is really important. You know, whether they're with their parents and their parents are just like, you know, you're going to have to get over it. Or, you know, it's not, you know, you'll make other friends. Like sometimes, you know, we say things that we think are helpful and they're really not. I do that as a parent and a counselor. So, but just giving them that space to be and to feel and to work through that. It's going to take time. But at the same time, you know, be careful not to like glorify it. And a lot of times like schools won't allow like memory type things to occur just because it glorifies the situation a little bit. So they, like, again, that's another like fine line to toe, because you want to remember the person and honor them, but at the same time, you got to be careful not to glorify the situation that happened. And so just, again, like I said, being there to listen, to just for them to spill it all out to you, and to be that supportive person that'll just be like, I will just listen and nod my head and let you speak. And if it's something that's very persistent, then they're really struggling and it's been like a long time, then I would recommend that they would get some sort of outside therapy and be seeing someone. So does that help? I don't know.
It does. Yeah. I have a a really long list of things not to say. So sometimes it's hard to know what do you say, what can you do.
But it goes back to that just listening and reflecting, and just so tell me about the person, like tell me about your relationship, like what are the things that you remember, what were the things that were really valuable, to honor the memory that they have of that person, so that it's not necessarily overshadowed by the event that took place, that ended their life, but that they had this beautiful friendship, or like that was just a really good person that they could trust or laugh with, or like can talk about those things, and focus on that, and like help that to open up and allow the person to talk and to feel. And if they cry, they cry, and if they get mad, they get mad, like kind of just giving them that space then.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
This is a question that I would have, and I just wonder if anybody else who ends up watching this would have it too. You say know your local mental health crisis centers and phone numbers. Where would be a good place to look for that if you don't know what those numbers are? Like where to start looking for those kind of resources?
I would say probably the county, like your county website might be a good place to start. And I can see if there's more of I will do some digging and see if there's more of a directory for like the state, and see if like the state has a directory of like all the crisis lines and things like that, and see if there's like crisis centers. So I'll do some digging and see if I can pop that into this as a link before I send it to Chris.
Cool.
Yeah. Let me write that down.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments or thoughts?
No, I think, with this topic, there are always going to be more questions. And I think I love this page of support, because in reality, every single case is going to be different. Every single kid is going to be different, and how we interact with them will be different.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited to look at some of these resources, because I know that it is something that I'm not an expert in for sure. And I would kind of guess that the vast majority of people who will end up watching this, youth volunteers, the one who just cares about youth within their church, especially for those who are part-time, or bivocational in youth ministry.
Mm-hmm.
We all just have a heart for the teenagers, but we also don't necessarily all know what to do. So to have some of those resources to go to, and I love the suggestion of going to a school counselor, in that regard, that you have somebody who actually is trained, and that we could potentially point the teens towards, or coming up with that list of counselors within our own area that we could, once it goes past our own skill level, that we can kind of get help to give help, I think is really important. So thank you for doing this with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. And like I said, there's a ton of links in through here. So feel free to explore. And if there's ever any questions, I did put my information at the end here. So you are welcome to email me or call me or text me, and I will see if I can help you or direct you in the right direction. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thanks just for the good reminder too, because I've struggled sometimes, especially with my student. And like you said, Danae, I'm a fixer. Like, okay, here's a problem, here's a solution. Like, let's do this and move on. And I'm also someone that I'm not going to settle for baloney answers and people taking the easy route out. Like, I'm like, hey, like, yeah, this is going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to push you and challenge you to do this because I know the end's going to justify the means. And so I've struggled with, am I doing this too much? And so I think it's a good to hear that to an extent that's okay, just to continue to toe that line, as long as it's the first of, hey, I care about you, I love you, like I'm here for you no matter what. Like that is clearly gone with that. So I just really appreciated that reminder and affirmation, encouragement with that. And so it was good. And to be more reflective and not just grilling with my questions.
That's a hard one, especially when they don't want to talk, because then you just want to try to get something out of them that you can work with. And so cool. Well, it was great to be with you all tonight.
Yeah. Thanks, Danae. And if it's all right, can I close us in prayer?
Absolutely.
That'd be awesome.
Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for Danae. I thank you for just her willingness to be able to share her insights and her experience with us. And Lord, I pray for us as leaders, for the leaders that will watch this, for the leaders and the students of the ministries in our region. Lord, you know those students, you know those ministries, you know the needs far greater than we do. And I pray that you would help us to not only seek the resources listed, but to seek you as we seek to lead the students that you have put in our care. Lord, I also am reminded of this need for self-care, and that you would help us to be looking for how you can be impacting us as individuals, as leaders, and that we could be working on our own mental health and our own spiritual vitality with you as we seek to lead others in the same. But Lord, I thank you for this evening. I thank you for this time and this training, and I pray that you'd continue to be there and to support us as we need it and as we lead in the ways you've called us to. We love you, Lord, and we place this night and this time in your hands. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Real quick, Danae, I forgot to ask one super important question. Do you think an outing to golf simulators with students would be a huge answer to overcome depression and anxiety?
Definitely. If anything, it's because they're going to take a picture in a golf cart that's like coming out of a wall and, top secret information there. But yes, absolutely. I think golf simulators are definitely a healing factor here for especially the avid golfer students in your life, because they're going to be missing their golf courses in January. So
Nice.
So, the shameless plug here, you can name this said establishment, and if anybody's ever in your neck of the woods.
Remember, in my neck of the woods in January and moving forward, please come to Next Shot Golf. That's the entrepreneur supporter thing that comes back here at the come on. One more.
All the way back in your
all the way back.
presentation.
Oh, there it is. Here we go. Entrepreneur supporter, because my husband is opening up Next Shot Golf, which is a golf simulator business to which we hope to impact the community, and then also bring in our church plant, Living Bridge Church, and to meet a meeting space there, and hopefully prayerfully growing that ministry as well. So shameless plug.
And I thought even the 2-hour drive, well worth it to drive out for
Absolutely.
afternoon together.
Absolutely. There's a coffee shop next door. There's a pizza place. There's a bagel shop. I mean,
Geez, everything.
Got it
awesome.
all.
Bugs and coffee and golf. You can't get much better
Breakfast,
than
lunch,
that.
and dinner. Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for this. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. So
Awesome.